let my people go. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Araminta Ross. Some of you might know me as Minty. How about Araminta Tubman? How about Harriet Ross? How about the General? Tonight, I've been known by all those names, but I came here this evening to share with you being just plain old Harriet Tubman. And it is such an honor to be here with you and to tell you my story. Now, I want you to just imagine for a moment a beautiful songbird flying across the eastern shore of Maryland. And he's looking down over the beautiful landscape and seeing the streams and the river. And there's plenty there, plenty to eat for creatures and for humans alike, not just to survive, but to thrive. And our little songbird, he's going to land on a tree at a plantation owned by a man by the name of Edward Brodus. A plantation where they grow cotton, timber, and some crops and things. And that's when I spotted that little bird. He sat on a tree just across the cabin in the slave quarters where I lived. And they were looking at the Ross family. It was my mama, my daddy, my brothers and sisters, and we had just come in from a long day of work, settling down to a nice meal. I can't remember exactly what it was. Maybe it was like some corn mash or some sweet potatoes or some fresh vegetables from the garden. And we were just sitting around talking, and finally the heat of the day just forced us to go outside, the whole family, and sit down and gather around and just catch a cool breeze before we had to retire to bed. And just about that time, Daddy Ben, we heard him say that a boy, a couple plantations over, a slave boy by the name of Joe, had managed to escape. And he wasn't caught. Well, we all just sat there for a little while, stunned in silence. We didn't know what to say. And then we heard this beautiful voice. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since Joe laid his burdens down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since Joe laid his burdens down. See, what Daddy Ben was doing a Negro spiritual. And those songs were sung for most about everything with my people. To announce weddings, maybe a new baby was coming, to talk about God, to talk about family. Those spirituals were used with everything. But tonight, it was a song of jubilation. Joe feels better, so much better, since he laid his burden down. Joe feels better, so much better, since he laid his burden down. Those Negro spirituals brought so much peace and comfort for any situation that the slaves had to go through. And I want you to help me with one, so maybe you can just experience one tonight. You think you're ready for something like that?
Yeah.
So I got this stick here, right? That's the guarantee participation. But whenever you see me raise my stick, what I want you to say is, let my people go. So I'm going to repeat a little bit of that song that I came in with, and you're going to help me out tonight. Whenever you see my stick, let's practice one time. I lift my stick up, you say, let my people go. And you got to do it slave-like. You got to put some soul in it. Let my people go. Oh, perfect. Absolutely perfect. When Moses was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. The Lord told Moses what to do. Let my people go. To see those Hebrew children through. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Hello, Pharaoh, he's got to. This big one, we'll make it last, okay? Let my people go. Very, very good. Y'all are songbirds. Now I want you to listen here to this noise here. That song that you heard was me, Harriet. And I was thrashing against the bars of slavery like a bird that had been captured and put in a cage. You see, what had happened was I had married a man, a free man by the name of John Tubman. And I had just gotten the word a few days ago that I was going to be sold down further into slavery and never see my family again. And I was pleading and arguing and fussing and begging John to go with me. But he wouldn't go. He wouldn't risk his freedom for me. Well, about that time I had been hearing about that Underground Railroad. And I knew in that moment when John wouldn't run with me, I'd have to make use of that Underground Railroad all by myself. Now, some of you might not know what the Underground Railroad is, I'm not sure. But it's not a real railroad as we know railroads with a car and rails. But it was a route, it was a way to take people from one place to the other, to take them from slavery to freedom. Now, it had, just like a real railroad, stations, station masters, conductors, and passengers. Okay? Those station masters were black and white folks who hated slavery. And they risked their very lives to give to runaway slaves food, shelter, someplace to lay their head, clothing. And that was mighty, mighty, mighty good for their bodies. But sometimes when those passengers arrived at a station, they were treated with kindness. They got a kind word. And they were treated and looked in the eye and treated as equal, perhaps maybe for the first time in their lives. And that was so good for their soul. But these station masters also knew that these slaves, they were not like animals and they were not ignorant. And they trusted their very lives to their being able to remember secret information about how to get to the next slave station. Now, some of the songs that we might sing during slavery time would be something like, let's see, get on board, little children, get on board, little children, get on board, little children, there's room for many more. The gospel wonderful train is coming. I see it round the bend. I hear those trains are rumbling and they're rolling through the land. Just get on board, little children, get on board. Little children, get on board. There's children, there's room for many on board. The fare is cheap and all can go. The rich and poor are there. No second class upon this train, no difference in the fare. Just get on board. Little children, get on board. Little children, get on board. Little children, there's room for many on board. And that's a pretty easy, cold slave song, right? Straightforward. Get on board, little children. But sometimes the conductors would say, steal away, steal away to Jesus. I'm gonna steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. Now we would say steal away to let the slaves know that we was getting ready to go soon. And they need to get themselves together to get to the meeting place. Or they might hear, wait in the water, wait in the water, children, wait in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Now see, these were cold songs, and they were so good that sometimes we'd have white folks singing right along with us. They wouldn't even know what they were singing about. I remember my very first trip on the Underground Railroad. It was dark. It was cold. It was lonely. And it was long. The route went from Maryland up to Philadelphia. And when I did arrive, I just took a look at my hands to see if they was the same hands now that they was free. There was such a glory over everything, and the sun shone down so bright through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was just in heaven. I stayed in Philadelphia and worked there, and it was friends like William Still and Frederick Douglass and Thomas Garrett. And I even over time made some women's friends like Lucretia Mott and Sarah Bradford. And they helped me to find jobs, and they helped me to get settled. But you know what? I thought about my family all the time. You see, I had finally arrived at the place that I had dreamed about so long, but there was nobody there to greet me when I got there. I was a stranger in a strange land. And so this one thing I determined, I was free, and with God's help, they would be free also. I would go back, and I would get them and bring them north to where I was. And so I went back. I went back 19 times, and I was able to bring about 70 souls into freedom. You know, our little songbird finally had a chance to be free. Before I knew it, that war. You know, I knew that war was coming because the Lord had told me 3 years before it broke out that it was going to happen. And the Lord also told me that my peoples was going to be free. One day, I was so surprised when my friends told me that I had gotten a letter from Governor Andrews from Massachusetts asking me, Harriet Tubman, to be involved in the war. I couldn't even read the letter. I had never had the chance to learn to read and write. Somebody had to read it to me, and when I pondered on it, I thought about those words, I knew I had to go. So I was under the command of General Hunter, Higginson, and then Colonel James Montgomery. The first place they sent me was to South Carolina. And I served in places like Beaufort and Charleston and Port Royal. And I first went down there as a cook and a laundress. And that was okay, because you see, I'm small in stature and my features are pretty plain, and that allowed me to just kind of blend in and just fit into the background, to move and to get to know the peoples there. I was so reminded of my Underground Railroad days of leading people through and gathering them around and getting them to trust me. And so it wasn't very long before I was helping the women folks to earn money by making gingerbread and root beer. And I was helping them to figure out how to get the soldiers' needs taken care of and how to take care of themselves. One time, I even had a chance to come to Fernandina. I was called from Hilton Head, where I was working, to come down to Fernandina because the soldiers were dropping like flies from dysentery. And even the commanding officer here had gotten sick, and he fell ill to the disease. And so I just waded in the water and I pulled some roots like water lilies and roots like crane's bill, and I boiled up a tea and I fed it to the commanding officer here. And when he got well, you know what he said to me? He said, "Give it to the men." So I got a bigger pot this time. And I brewed up a nice big batch of tea and I fed it to as many as I could. And don't you know, they all got well. Glory, glory, hallelujah. As time went on, the war just got worse. And so when we would see the lightning, well, that was the guns. And when we would hear the thunder, oh, that was the big guns. And when we would see the rain falling, well, that was the blood. And when we went to reap the crops, that was the dead bodies. It was a bad time. It was a hard time. But I did what I could to nurse the soldiers. So now I was there in the war as a cook, as doing laundry, cooking food, making shortbread, and now I was going to be a nurse. But the biggest thing that happened when I was in Carolina was Colonel Montgomery decided that they was going to do a raid on the Comi River. And I was called in to help with it. You see, Colonel Montgomery, he knew all about me from the Underground Railroad days, and he knew what I could do. And so he let me plan it. He was the commanding officer, but I was the one that put it all together. I had 8 Negro soldiers in my command. Colonel Montgomery, he had 300. We took 3 war boats up and down that river. We burned buildings. We took food, we took supplies, munitions, guns, everything. But the funniest thing about it all was the people. Before that raid was over, we were able to gather together 750 souls on those boats. They came from everywhere, from those plantations. They came running just like the nation of Israel, trying to get across that Red Sea when it parted. One of the funniest times when there was a woman and she was running, and she had a young'un around her shoulder, and the pot was still smoking where she had just pulled it off the fire. And one of her babies was sitting on her shoulder. The baby had one hand around her forehead, trying to hold on, and the other hand in the pot of rice, still trying to eat. Oh, there was chickens a-clucking, there was pigs a-squealing, and there was children a-hollering, but they were coming, they were coming, they were coming, they were running to freedom. After the war was over, I tried to be a bird that was just trying to find a nest and take a rest. But there was so much to do. The people who had just come out of slavery, they still needed support. They still needed some place to go where they would be welcome and they would be cared for. And so I started a home. I started the Harriet Tubman house, and I welcomed anybody who wanted to come could come to that home and be taken care of. We planted a garden. We raised fruits and vegetables and sold them to make money. We cleaned houses and we did whatever we could. With my good friend Sarah Bradford, I'm writing right now a book about my life that I'm hoping that people will buy to raise money to help the house. And because the government never gave me one penny for my war efforts, oh yes, I did get some monies to get some supplies along the way, but I never did get any money for myself, what I did. That's why I'm here at a place like this tonight, speaking to people to raise even more money to help with the Harriet Tubman house. You know, people are always asking me, Harriet, why do you do what you do? Why do you even risk your life for these things? And I always tell them, during my Underground Railroad days, I heard their groans, and I heard their moans, and I saw their tears, and I would give every drop of blood in my body to see that they would be free. But you know what? It really wasn't me. It was the Lord. I always told God, I'm going to steady on to you. And I knew that as long as he wanted to use me, he would take care of me. And when he didn't want to use me no more, well, then I was ready to go. I was always told God, I'm going to steady on to you, and you got to see me through. And he always did. You know, I always thought that slavery was the next thing to hell. And that if any man would enslave another man, well, I suspect he might just send that man to hell too. I reckoned in my mind that I had a right to two things, liberty or death. And if I couldn't have one, well, then I would have the other. For no one would take me alive. I would fight for my freedom for as long as I lived. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. No more moaning, no more groaning, and no more weeping over me. Can you see that before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. I've got freedom. Yes, I've got freedom. I've got freedom over me. Can you see that before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. Thank y'all so much for giving me that. Y'all ready to be songbirds with me one more time to let me go out? This time, I'm going to give this to my wonderful husband. This time, when you see me raise my hand, I want you to say, farewell, oh farewell. Okay, let's practice that. Farewell, oh farewell. I'm taking y'all on the road. When that old chariot comes, I'm gonna leave you bound for the promised land. I'm gonna leave you. I'm sorry, friends, to leave you. Farewell, oh farewell. Good. But I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, farewell. Oh, I'll meet you in the morning. Bound for the promised land. On the other side of Jordan, we're bound for the promised land. I'm sorry, friends, to leave you. Farewell, oh farewell. But I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, oh farewell. Oh, I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, farewell. Ooh, I'll meet you in the morning. Farewell, farewell.
Thank you. I think she's going to come back if you have any questions for her.
Hallelujah.
Yes, sir.
You said Harriet was small in stature.
Yeah, she was barely 5 feet. You know, she was one of these little powerhouses. You know, had pure African blood. Her grandmother Modesty was brought over on the slave ship, so she had pure African blood, and she was just little, but so mighty. Yes, yes. And as you can see, she never really thought of herself as any kind of great beauty, but she used it to her advantage. those plain features. She would, during the Underground Railroad, she would don disguises, including being dressed as a man, to get past the patrollers and to ride in trains unnoticed. She would pick up a paper and pretend to read it. Oh, yeah, she could read. But she figured nobody would be looking for her if she had a newspaper in her hand, reading, you know. So she was very cunning, very intelligent, very witty woman. Any other questions? Yes.
Can you tell the story of the boy who she stood and got hit in the head?
Well, the story goes is that the young man was trying to escape. And of course, I've been doing a lot of research on Harriet through the years, and you can read different accounts of the same incident. You know, people have different ages, different circumstances, but the one that seems to be the most reliable was that he was trying to escape. And she ran after him knowing she was trying to save him from further trouble, because she knew what he had on his mind. And when he ran into a store in the town, right off of the plantation, she ran after him in that store. And when she was helping him to run out of the store, the owner, the overseer of the plantation caught up with them at that point and kind of cornered both of them in the store. He ran out, and as she was trying to protect him, he threw the weight, and she took it in the head. So she did all of this wonderful things that people kind of scout, and a spy, and a nurse and stuff. With a head wound that had her down, she probably had a concussion and a broken skull and the rest. She was out of it for several months. And she suffered from, I guess you call it narcolepsy. She would just fall asleep at any time. She never knew. Now, how do you not get caught when you're running around? You know, with the capacity to just fall asleep or to fall into almost like a trance-like state for moments at a time. And so that she suffered with that. Did that answer your question? Yeah, it was her mom that nursed her back to health, and it was her mom being such a good nurse that taught her to be the good nurse that she was able to be during the Civil War, when she did quite a bit of nursing to the soldiers, black and white, during that effort.
Did you happen to say where she was born?
She was born in Bucktown, Maryland, in Dorchester County, on the Brodus Plantation was where she mostly grew up. There were several families that kind of borrowed her family kind of back and forth, you know, the Stewarts and the Broduses, the Pattersons, they kind of borrowed the slaves kind of back and forth, but that Brodus Plantation was where she and her mom and her dad, her mother and her father, mostly lived, considered it mostly home. Did that answer?
Yes.
So, and there's markers there now. If you go to Maryland now, they've...
I was going to say, how about the ancestors? Where are some of the family?
Well, the part that, before the war began, she was able to inherit some land in Auburn, New York, and upstate New York, because she tried to settle in Canada, St. Catharines, Canada, but it was too cold for the old folks. They were like, we wasn't feeling that kind of cold in Canada. So she got hold of some land she had that was donated or sold very cheaply in Auburn, New York, and that's where the family kind of settled after the war. And then as she would continue to get them out, she even got her parents out of slavery with a makeshift wagon, and then she got them onto a train. But anyway, she got them up there, and so that's where that's pretty much the homestead for her descendants is in that Auburn, that New York, upstate New York area right now. Yes.
What was your inspiration for deciding to put this together, this show together, and what did you find the most helpful things to call on in terms of your research?
Okay. In 2000, the city of Fernandina Beach put on a year 2000 show up at the high school, and they wanted to portray different historical characters in this presentation. They gave you 10 seconds each one. We all got 10 seconds. And they were looking for someone to portray Harriet, and it fell in my lap, and that was it. You know, have you ever had those moments, you know, where something comes across your desk? I was working at the marina with Comi, you know, and when it came across my desk, I was like, oh my goodness. So I knew a little bit about her, but when I began to dig, the minute they gave me the script, I went, oh no, this is not right. This is not her, you know. And I totally rewrote what they did, and then I began to dig more and dig more. And later on, I was hired as a librarian. I served as the first youth librarian for the Nassau County Public Library System. So I cheated. I had all kinds of and those books were very helpful. But you know how history is. You know, some history books are written through different filters and different lenses, and people have different objectives for telling other people's stories. So there were some contradictions, and there was some differences of opinions, you know. But I just kept digging and digging and digging, and finally began to put together something that makes sense to you, you know. And as for putting the music in there, this is why I call this a song celebration. I sing also with the Pet Community Ensemble, which is Nanette Archery. Nanette Archery is, you know, she's the president and founder of the Pet Community Ensemble. And we did quite a few Negro spirituals throughout the years as a group. And so I already had that in me, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to combine the two things, to teach a little bit about the spirituals as well as give information. So, does that help? Yeah.
I heard that Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was a song she enjoyed.
Oh yeah, I think that Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was actually the song that they sang on her deathbed. You know, swing low, sweet chariot. If you know it, come join me. It's coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. That was a cold song too. Yes.
Does anyone know exactly how long she was in Burnaby during the war, and whether she was ousted before or accommodated by someone else?
Yeah, not really. I looked. I kept flipping to the back of all the books to see, and there's very little about it. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, you know, technically, she was still a runaway slave, you know.
And you're not going to take time to sit down.
And you're not to write down. And she was a spy too at that point during the war. So they really, what they chose to document and not document, you know, was. I was just, what were they thinking? And so, yeah, in fact, Mr. Frank O. out at the Fort Clinch, you know, I read one of his articles he wrote about it. I think he did some digging and trying to get down to the bottom of it, but I'm sure it happened, but it's treated almost like speculation because no one wanted to really confirm it. Yeah. Yes.
I had a question about, like, I don't know exactly how long it took her to do like all these underground railroad trips before she got active with the military. Do you know how long it took?
Well, she was on a railroad. She went as a conductor. First, she used it to free herself, and then she, in 1849, she started being a conductor herself, and she continued even through the Fugitive Slave Act, you know, which had started in 1850. to carry people, at least, at first she just took them to Philadelphia when the Fugitive Slave Law was enacted. She had to go all the way to Canada and upstate New York. And so she did that for maybe about 11, somewhere around 10, almost 11 years, where she was a conductor on the railroad. And in 1860, when the war started, I think she was called on just a little after, maybe it had been going on for several months, not quite a year, before she was called in to use her skills as a conductor in Underground Railroad to help with the war effort. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I didn't realize it started so early before the war.
Yeah, and it had been going on for a while before she got involved. It had really, the Underground Railroad has been going on for quite a few years before she even got involved and took advantage of it herself.
Her husband was never reunited with her current husband, whatever happened to her husband.
Okay, her husband, Judgment John, it was interesting. When she got to Philadelphia, of course, she missed her family, including her husband. And so she went to William Still and she said, listen, I gotta go back to my husband. This is the only man I've ever loved. He's the love of my life, and she hated to have to leave him, but when she went back, he had already remarried. He had already taken up with another woman as his wife. And she was, I know, don't you just hate it when it ends like that? And so she was absolutely devastated beyond grief, at that. And so she didn't waste that trip though. On her way back north, she was able to gather a few people who wanted to escape, to run away, and she was able to take them up. And so she remained single for quite a few years. While she was doing all this wonderful, fantastic work in the military at the different camps, nursing the soldiers, and this young guy by the name of Nelson Davis, 20 years her junior, fell in love with her while she was nursing. When the war was over, he found her. He arrived at her doorstep in Auburn, New York. I think he was just pretending like he just wanted to get some of the care that he could get her home, but he had other intentions, and then sooner or later he wooed her and they did marry and stayed married for quite a few years, about 27 years they were married until he finally died of, I think, of pneumonia years later. He had some lung issues he had contracted, but his name was Nelson Davis, and so she did find happiness in him, but not with John Tubman. Any other questions? You guys have been absolutely positive.
So happy that you were here. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.